Well, that's the perfect way to get going then. So joining us on the line tonight is a man who has always stayed on the top of the wrestling business, being involved in so many different facets of it. But you know him as a AAA and CMLL world champion. He's also been a United States champion in WCW and a television champion as well as a WCW and NWA tag team champion. He's also a amazing podcast host on Keeping It 100 with the man himself, K-Dog Konnan. Thank you so much for joining the two-man power trip.
Yo, man, thank you for having me on. Is this the first time I've been on here?
Yeah, first time for Konnan and the two-man power trip. This is it's a pretty big deal for us. We appreciate you taking the time.
All right, that's cool. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And we're here to talk about the big MLW Fury Road show coming up October 4th at the Melrose Ballroom in Queens, New York, part of a live TV taping for beIN Sports. Like I said off the top, you're always involved in a lot of stuff going on in the wrestling business, but it seems like now you really have your hand in some of the biggest events going on all around the world. And with MLW, we saw them in their comeback to the professional wrestling landscape. Obviously, they dominated the podcasting world for a long time, and they reignited their promotion, and you're a huge part of it now. So what do you think about this resurgence of MLW?
Yeah, it's real cool because when I first met Court, he basically had told me about a podcast, which I thought was some sort of radio station or something. And so, you know, when we started podcasting maybe 6 years ago, I think the only guys that were doing it were maybe, what's this guy, Cole Cabana and maybe Meltzer. And so, like, we were the first ones actually charged to listen to us. So we knew he had something going, and he had just gotten out of wrestling, out of WWE. He was burned out. He was kind of not too happy with the way the business had gone for him. And the last thing I ever expected him to do was start MLW again, which he did. And then he just invited me one day because he told me I had said that I was going to do a retirement tour next year. And so he said, why don't you do something in New York? I go, bro, I can't do a whole match. I'm still trying to get into shape. He says, well, just come out and just do, it'll be a battle royal. So I just went out into the battle royal and I did a couple moves, and the people, you know, they showed love, and it was a really cool experience. And then, you know, once I was backstage, he was like, hey, would you mind helping me here or helping me there? Because, you know, I've basically done everything there is to do in this business. So, you know, I can do everything from commentate to help produce a segment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And we've seen you do a lot of really cool stuff. But like I said off the top, all around the world. And I feel like having you join up with MLW and we get to see some of the stuff that you can bring to the table again in the United States is always cool. Because, I mean, you've got that experience. And obviously the guys in MLW who are getting their first shot now to be on TV, they're going to take advantage of a guy like you because you're a wealth of information.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I mean, when you accumulate that sort of information, you know, you want to share it. No reason to keep it. So you want to share it and you want to pay it forward and you want to help other people that maybe didn't have some of the same teachers that you did and leave the business in a better place than you found it. And, you know, and I just still love to do what I do.
So what do you think of this whole entire independent wrestling resurgence and how it's really taken off? Because, I mean, you can't go now talking to a wrestling fan without talking about anybody outside of WWE. It's like all they want to talk about are the independent brands, and obviously MLW is just picking up more and more steam. You see these shows getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, we just passed the All In show a few weeks ago, and people having an interest in New Japan being in the United States, and obviously AAA and CMLL, and you can get all this great stuff now. What do you think about this? Is this something you ever envisioned for independent wrestling outside of WWE?
Yeah, no, I didn't envision that, but I did. I just think it's cool. Like when I first broke into the business, you know, back then they used to collect tapes. So I was always watching tapes from Japan. And so I loved New Japan back in the 90s. And I was already a Lucha Libre, so I knew what Lucha Libre was. So, you know, I had a lot of access to that, you know, now with the internet, everybody can see everything. So it's pretty cool how everybody is kind of like on this tip of, you know, if we like, you know, Japanese wrestling, that's what we're going to support. And, you know, I think we've all seen stuff we love in WWE and stuff that we hate. And I think it was a really cool way of fans, especially All In, but it was a very cool way of fans of telling WWE, we're not satisfied with what you're giving us, so we are going to support something else. And that had to open up their eyes. And so that's good. It's good. And also just the way how, wrestling is cross-pollinated into other genres, where now you have comedy wrestling, like, what Joey Ryan does, or Colt Cabana does, and you've got hardcore wrestling, and you've got now, this is something that definitely came from Mexico, from AAA, the promotion I work at, those intergender matches. That's a AAA invention, lucha getting the respect it deserves. When I first brought lucha into the United States, it was misunderstood. And obviously it was a very different style, and it was never really given the respect it's being given right now. So it's just pretty cool how all the power's in the fans' hands right now, where it should always have been, and promotions need to start listening to their fan base, because if not, they'll switch allegiances on you.
Yeah, and would you say that the, quote, smart fan or the smart mark has now just evolved into being the fan? I mean, it seems like now, everybody who's talking about wrestling outside of WWE is a smart fan. So I think it's almost like evolved into
it's more like
today.
That's more now the norm, than the exception. So, and that all comes with, you have a plethora of information that you didn't have when I was growing up. You know what I'm saying? And mostly it's the internet, So, you have wrestlers on podcasts, you have all these different things they really didn't have before, where you can find out more about the business, and you're more sophisticated. I grew up in an era where, even though because I didn't grow up wanting to be a wrestler, but I remember looking at wrestling and go, okay, well, something here is staged, is fixed. I mean, there's just no way you can keep hitting a guy in the face and it's not bruised. You know what I'm saying? But the wrestling industry was still like, everybody thinks it's real. And, now it's come to the realization where people are now appreciating it, instead of how for a long time everybody said, oh, that fake stuff. Now you have a lot of people who appreciate it for the art it really is, and really give it its props. And you're seeing on Sports Illustrated, you're seeing on ESPN. It's just, part of like American culture.
And the thing with you, you're always at the forefront of bringing in great lucha libre stars. Like you mentioned, you basically brought lucha to the U.S., whether it was in ECW or bringing guys to WCW. But now, even with guys like Daga and all these guys kind of making a name for themselves, Phoenix and Pentagon, you're kind of right there. What do you think about this next generation, these young lucha libre stars that are really, really great?
Well, what I like about them is that they're very prepared, because, Eddie and Ray and myself and Juventud and all these other guys, we kind of opened up the road for them, Alberto Del Rio, and we're telling them, okay, now when you go there, you have to know English. Like when we first went there, everybody wasn't sure if they had to know English or not. There was just a lot of, most of the wrestlers, when they went there, they had to be deprogrammed because they only knew lucha libre. So now you had to teach them American wrestling. But now, the luchador is better equipped, better informed, so he knows he better already be brushing up on his English before he gets there. He already kind of knows, he's already wrestled in the United States and learned the American style, so when they call him, he's ready. There's a lot of things. They're better prepared now, and they're not on that party tip like we were, where it was just wild, it was like the Wolf of Wall Street back then. Everybody was just messed up. And a lot of these guys now, they're just like video game guys, and you might see some guys smoking weed or an Adderall, but that's about it. It isn't the wild party scene that it was in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? So it's a much cleaner, group.
Definitely. And it seems to be a lot of these guys, like you said, are staying out of trouble and video games, more or less, or nothing too crazy, which is good and probably better for their overall long-term health. But, guys like you and Ray and Hoovy and Eddie and guys that laid the groundwork, I feel like that's the really the good old days, and those are excellent guys. How do you think the guys today compare to guys like you and guys like Rey Mysterio and Eddie?
Well, I look at it like anything else. Like I look at it, rock music, baseball, basketball. You're always going to have those guys in their fields that, because they're that much more committed, that much more dedicated, that much more talented, that much more driven, a combination of all those things that make you special. You're always, Eddie Guerrero would have been great in the 60s or in the 40s, and probably Ed Strangler Lewis would have been great in our era, because when you're great, you're just great. You know what I'm saying? Just like when you see a great movie and it's always great, or a great act, or a great song. So, you just figure out who are those, like, for example, I know for a fact, probably in our day, Ricochet would have been hanging with us, and, Osprey and those type of guys, you know what I'm saying? So, every generation is going to have those guys that really, connect with the crowd, and they capitalize on it. And so, every generation just has their great wrestlers.
And what is your kind of perspective as far as now cornering guys and managing guys, and kind of looking at it from that perspective rather than the in-ring part? Is it kind of a whole new deal for you, if you will?
No, because I've been kind of, always behind the scenes mentoring a lot of people. So now it's just kind of an extension of what I do. But it's just another role to play, another part to play. And I like to, do different things, whether I'm managing, whether like in Mexico right now, like I'll give you an example. Do you watch Impact?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm with that group LAX, and they're like really big baby faces, right? But when I go to Mexico, we just did a taping there. I go up there as a really hated heel, and then I went up there with Jeff Jarrett, who's got mega heat in Mexico. And I just love, playing with people's emotions and being able to get into different characters and elicit emotion out of the crowd. And because there's just some stuff that always works. And so, there's that, the entertainer in me that still enjoys doing that. But at the same time, I also love seeing somebody and telling them, yo, do this, do this, do this. And it works, and they're happy. And you just start seeing their growth and their progression.
I feel like you kind of, returning a few times over the many, many years with AAA, obviously in the 90s, you were the biggest star in Mexico. They were the Hulk Hogan of Mexico, if you will. But, you always had kind of almost, I wouldn't say love-hate, but you always were there and kind of came back. But it seems like you were always able to elicit, like you said, that emotion, whether you were the Hulk Hogan, you were mega popular, or as a huge heel down there. And even as a booker, you were able to, do a lot of different things with a lot of different guys and get them over. Is that something that you just have that special magic in Mexico where you kind of pulling the string, so to speak?
I don't know, bro. It's just like, I've always liked to be creative. I remember as a little kid, I would go out and actually do like performances for my family, so I was always like an entertainer. So I always like to go out there and entertain. I just think, here's the thing. When I first saw Rey Mysterio, who was a very, very small guy, so small that Antonio Peña wanted to put him with the minis, okay? And he was real skinny. But I just thought, now I'd never been top booking. I didn't grow up wanting to be a wrestler. I wasn't, your average fan. I kind of ran into the business. But I just kept thinking to myself, look how small this guy is. Anybody you put him in the ring, and not only that, forget the fact that he was small, he was incredibly talented. And I was like, there's nobody doing this in the business. And I've only been in maybe 6 months. And I was like, there's nobody in the business doing this. And imagine if you put him against much bigger guys, the type of sympathy he would get. And the bigger guys could base him really easy because he's really light. And that's kind of what happened, but you never know how great Rey Mysterio is because you're kind of in Mexico until you see him go to Japan and blow up, and you see him go. And Eddie, Eddie was incredibly talented, and I knew he was talented. I told him, hey, leave CMLL. He was actually wearing a mask at that time. He was mad. He goes, I can't believe they're making me wear a mask. He goes, then take the shit off. He goes, I'm not going to do that. That's disrespectful. I go, disrespectful? Your dad was a rebel. Chavo was a rebel. He left Japan and took the belt. I go, just take the fucking mask off. And he went in the AAA ring, took off the mask. He goes, I'm Eddie Guerrero, the son of Gory Guerrero, the brother of blah, 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 blah. And then he started that whole thing with a Love Machine, the Gringo Locos, and they were incredible. But you don't know how great they are till all of a sudden I saw that year they won the Observer Tag Team of the Year. I was like, wow. You know, you just never know how great they are, because greatness is kind of like standing kind of right in front of you, but you don't know how great it is in the grand scheme of things until they leave where they're at. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you were like, wow, these guys were real special, huh?
And you had a pretty good history with the Gringos, Locos, Eddie Guerrero, and Art Barr.
Right. Yeah, well, they were my best friends in real life, so it was just kind of like, you know, we traveled together, we trained together, we hang out together. We might as go, you know, we worked together in the ring, because I was the baby face and they were I joined them and it was even more fun, you know. But, you know, they didn't need me. They were great. You know, they were great on their own. The best tag team I've ever seen in Mexico. And Eddie probably, he is the best work I've ever been in the ring with.
Eddie, one of the best ever. Rey Mysterio, one of the best ever. But what about, you know, in the 90s, a guy that was the best ever maybe at that time period down in Mexico, Perro Aguayo, and you kind of big feud with him at that point. That really kind of put you on the map, so to speak, as well. I mean, a guy that, you know, you're getting the younger guys over. Back then, he kind of, you know, helped you get over.
Right. Well, actually what happened was we had a mask versus hair match. And usually in Mexico, you don't see those matches. You'll usually see hair versus hair, mask versus mask. And when I was in Arena Mexico, they wanted me to lose my mask with different wrestlers. But again, I was like, well, why would I want to lose my mask? What happens when I lose my mask? What are they going to lose to me? You know? So, you know, most wrestlers were like, I'll lose my mask and get a huge payday, and that was it. But I was thinking of, well, how am I going to get over after this match? So I thought, let me lose my mask to this legend's hair, which very rarely happens. And then 6 months down the road, I'll put my hair against the legend's hair and he can lose it to me. And that's exactly what I did. And that really blew me up too, you know?
Definitely. And about a little while later, big time feud with Jake the Snake Roberts that kind of shook the wrestling world for a bit down there in Mexico. Right.
Yeah. He was a crazy guy, very smart guy, but definitely crazy. And he, you know, the one thing that he knew how to do was get me over, you know. And I was still, even though I was massively popular, I wasn't a great worker in the ring yet. And Jake helped me with a lot of little nuances I didn't really know about, because, you know, Mexican wrestling isn't as nuanced as American wrestling is. And so, you know, he really taught me a lot, and it ended up me and him breaking a Tijuana gate record when we did our hair versus hair match.
Triple Mania, which is basically for anybody who doesn't know, is basically the WrestleMania down in Mexico. And that was back in '94. Huge hair versus hair match, huge business, kind of shook up the business and really kind of further put you on the map. Because anytime, you know, you're in there with Jake Roberts having a big time match like that, it really helps elevate you, you know, pretty quickly through the ranks. Right. Well, the thing is that Jake was known, but he wasn't really known because WWE wasn't on TV yet in Mexico, but it did help me a lot. That's why we did it. That's why we did the match in Tijuana, because Tijuana is a border town, and half those people watch American wrestling, and and a lot of American wrestling fans cross the border to TJ to watch wrestling. So that fan base knew Jake real well. So that was a perfect place to culminate it. And, you know, we're talking about hair versus hair and different things, and we're talking about masks. Obviously, we were talking about mask versus hair match. But what did you think about in WCW when they were kind of pulling the mask off a lot of the wrestlers, like Rey Mysterio and Juventud? Was that something you thought was a no-no for WCW to be doing? Yeah, well, you know, me and Eric, who have since basically kind of like mended fences, we had a huge problem with that, you know, and I told him all the reasons he shouldn't do it professionally, culturally,
even personally, was something that Ray took very personal. He had his mind made up, and he even called Ray because he kind of either thought or knew that I was trying to make Ray not do it. And he called them up and he was like, if you don't show up for your match, you'll be in breach of contract, And so that's the genius of Vince. Vince put it right back on him and made tons selling merchandise. And so same thing with Hoovy, Jericho, who obviously wrestled in Lucha and understands the cultural significance of the mask. He actually had told me, he said, hey man, if you want to, I won't do the match. I don't know if he was going to pretend he was injured or what. But I was like, nah, bro, this is inevitable. If they're going to do it, I'd rather than do it with you. You know what I'm saying? So I think in hindsight, he may be the first guy, Bischoff, to say, I really didn't understand fully what those masks meant. Or, I think in hindsight, he would agree it was a mistake.
Now, as we start to wind it down here, I just have to ask you, because one of the greatest, your international wrestling legend, obviously Mexican wrestling legend. Is there anything you look back on more so than other matches and say, that's one of my favorites, or those are my favorites, or that guy was my favorite to work with? Is that possible for you to kind of look back? And I know obviously there's so many moments and so many wrestlers, but is there anything that sticks out to you?
My favorite matches were always usually the matches that my friends were involved in, because those were always really fun matches because you're wrestling your friends. Very memorable, I had a feud in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, which is on the border of El Paso, Texas, and where Eddie was like an idol. And we did this incredible angle where, me and him were best friends. And, then I turned on him, and that was incredible. That people can find it on YouTube. Another memorable angle was in Puerto Rico, Carlos Colon, who's like the most famous guy there ever as a wrestler. We did this angle where, and it was a slow burn, and where basically it ended up with me in the ring asking his daughter to marry me, while Carlos was there, and so were his sons Carlito, and Eddie, and I ended up hitting it with a guitar. And the place just riots. So those type of I remember more moments than people, because those moments kind of stay with me a little bit longer. I remember I hadn't been in Mexico for 7 years, and I came back, and I remember they had this interview with like all these wrestlers, and they were like, well, what do you think, about Konnan coming back? And all the wrestlers said, well, this is a different fan base, and he may not be as remembered as he thinks. They weren't like hating. They were just kind of like stating, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I was like, fuck, man, what if I go out there, nobody remembers me, or it's like not that much of a reaction, and it was kind of maybe the first time I can ever remember really, really getting nervous before a match, because you get anxious, but I was like really nervous. And they didn't even announce me. They just put my music, and that whole place, there was like 15,000 people in there easy. They were just, chanting my name. And it felt like I was like having an out-of-body experience. It was that intense. So those are kind of moments that I treasure a lot. Everything I did with Perro Aguayo in L.A., which at that time also broke 8 records. It was incredible. We had no idea the popularity that Lucha Libre had in L.A., we should have, I think that's after Mexico City, the city with the most Mexicans, but you just don't know till you get there. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hopefully that crowd at the Melrose Ballroom there on October 4th, this Friday night, they can maybe get a little bit in with you and give you another one of those moments. But I got to mention a couple of the stars here we got on the card. Flying Brian Jr., Filthy Tom Lawler, Sammy Callahan, MJF, of course, the great Tommy Dreamer is going to be in attendance there as well. But I got to ask you this. This resurgence of PCO, I mean, this is like the third time he's reinvented himself, but now he's become this cult figure in professional wrestling. What do you think about Pierre Carl Ouellet in 2018 doing his thing? It's unbelievable what he's done this year.
I'm a big fan of Pierre Carl Ouellet, and especially I went with him to a show in Lebanon where the promoter stiffed us, okay? And it was him and me and Frankie Kazarian, Kurgan, Stevie Ray, Jason Anderson from Canada, who helped put it together, and Gama Singh, a couple other people. It was a really wild time. And that's when I first really kind of met him. And he's a real cool guy, a real nice dude. And I'm very happy for all his success because, at his age and with his injuries and the risks that he takes, a lot of it, he's doing it for the love of the game. You know what I'm saying? And so, I tip my hat off to him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he had a chance in TNA in the mid-2000s where I believe he got injured, but he was doing these same things with the same moveset that he's always had. And I'm glad to see that people are recognizing him for doing what he's doing now because he's quite the specimen. But again, it's MLW. It's this October 4th at the Melrose Ballroom in New York City. You can go to MLWtickets.com for more information if you are not planning to be there. It will be a TV taping, so you can see almost all these matches on television. And Konnan, as we wrap it up, what we like to do usually is I would ask what your legacy is left in the business, but with you, you're always up to something. So what's next for Konnan? You've obviously dominated podcasts, and you had your hands in so many different pots in the business, but what's next for K-Dog here in 2018?
I think hopefully if everything happens 2019, something that I've been wanting to do for a long time is bring Lucha Libre in a big way to the United States, So that would be my next thing that I'm working on. But I did want to say one thing. It's such a pleasure working over at MLW because I love the fact how they're getting all these guys, whether it's, the controversial Teddy Hart or PCO or the top lucha names, or these young talents, MJF and, Selena De La Renta and, bringing in, I loved when he had Matt Riddle there and now he's got Tom Lawler. So he brings a little bit of everything, and then it's a quick 1 hour show, boom. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really digging what they're doing down there. And I did want to put that over. Great locker room, great vibe, great management team over there. So check out MLW. We're going to be in New York. When does this drop? Tomorrow?
It'll be out tomorrow. So if we're recording this tonight, it'll be out tomorrow and everybody can make their plans just in time to get there. But hey, listen, before we let you go, we want to also get the plug out there for Keeping It 100 and everything going on with your brand, the Konnan world. So please share it with the listeners of the Two Man Power Trip where they can find everything.
All right. So you can chop it up with me on either Twitter, Facebook at KONNAN 5150. You can check out my podcast under the Jericho Network, Keeping It 100 with Konnan. I usually do that show with Disco Inferno, Shane Helms, Juventud Guerrera, and our producer Jojo the Philly Twink Boy. Boom. And so we basically chop it up about politics, pop culture, sports, wrestling, everything. And you can check that out every Thursday. And then you can check me out also on Thursdays on Pop TV with LAX. And then AAA usually has usually about 2 or 3 TV tapings live on Twitch. The next AAA TV show will be October 19th from Naucalpan, which is Mexico City, Mexico. Let me see. I'm probably forgetting something, but that's basically what I'm doing. So I'm pretty busy.
You're always busy. You're always up to something. But look, we appreciate you taking the time tonight and spending a few with us and chopping it up. And all the best to you guys, MLW and Konnan, Keeping It 100. Thanks a lot for coming on. We appreciate it.
All right, man. Check us out on MLW Fusion. Boom.